welcome. Can you hear me? Check. Okay, so come to this stream. In this, be prototyping, creating, and publishing. Typing it, giving a GitHub repository, publishing it, and we'll modify it, making it open source. We'll talk all about that in this episode. So let's start with the first step, which is prototyping. Okay, so as I was saying, we're going to be making a calculator. So we're going to be prototyping. So the first step, I have a design tool called Figma. Yeah, recommend you get it. Really cool. And let's just start prototyping. You know, it's not going to be too, it's just going to be command line interface. So you're gonna call it calculator, and this calculator is going to be comprised of different things. So we'll have a frame of, which is our command prompt. You can just use one of the templates here, hit F, and then you can use tablet, desktop, and we're going to use desktop, and let's just use our desktop for the normal computer. Now here's our desktop. We're gonna call this the command prompt, and let's just come here. So this is our command prompt we can work with, and this command prompt, you can run it on the terminal, and it can do some things. So this is not going, the field is going to be like totally black, like so. Well, it's the command prompt, and the command prompt is black. So we assume that is black, and then we might have some text like this saying, let me just increase the font size, maybe to around 48, and we can write something like so. And because the text is also black, we can see it. And let's change it to FFF, which is white. Let me change it to FFF, and we can start typing. And when we type, you will see that when you start typing, you can see that we continue typing until we don't even see it. That's because the text is black, so we need to change the color of the text. And you make sure you can highlight, so if you can see some blue, that's a good sign. Just turn it to white, and you can now start typing. Now we can say enter a number, and then we'll get, you can have something like this, and then we have something like this. Enter our operator. So we are going to be entering an operator, later, and we are just gonna use the classic slash for division, this asterisk for multiplication, plus for adding, and minus, which means a hyphen subtracting. So we'll have something like that, and then we'll have like a blank space, just a blank space, just for good user experience, about good UX user experience, and just gonna put small space like so. So we're gonna put a small space. So enter a number, and the person will enter number, and the person will also enter an operator. So then we are just going to calculate. So we'll show them something like this that says calculating, and then dot, and then we can have something like, again, the answer is, and then you can call it like the answer is. So the answer is the answer is, and then dot dot dot, and then we are going to put for them the answer. So we're just gonna be, and if we are going to be implementing this for users, I highly suggest this because we don't want it to be too fast. Yeah, we can actually, when during this calculating, we have some module that you can use and import. That will delay. You'll have some delay. So also we're just gonna use this notation, and this will be the answer. This will be answer of our calculation, and that is how we'll format it. So we have some time passes. Just ask it again, enter an operator, and then when you're calculating, it will just show. And then we're going to use a module to wait for like a few milliseconds, and then we can now actually now do many things. So this is a very good project, because you can have some developers want to do very quick calculations. Let me just use some placeholder text. Let me say 18, and then I'll do a plus, and then if we want, we can just say enter another number. So we can say enter another number. Let me just keep space for this. Let me just control again, control, and then we are just gonna move this, and then you're gonna see, you can see enter another number, and then we can maybe use 18 again, and then maybe we can do calculating, and then you can see the answer is, this time you can just see 36. But that is how our workflow will be. So we'll be taking a number, calculating it, and then revealing the answer, showing the answer, I mean. So this will be a good exercise for beginners in Python. We learn how to deal with input, user input, variables, strings, manipulating control flow, and many other basics of Python. So before you want to program in Python, you can download Python at python.org, and when you come to their website python.org, you come here, and then here we can actually come here, and we can come here to downloads, and then this is the latest version, Python 3.8.5. Make sure that you are downloading it, and I would recommend getting a code editor like VS Code or something like VS Code or the other editors like idea some code editors that, or else if you do not have a code editor, you can use the good old Python IDLE. The Python IDLE is just a code editor, but it's very minimal. Just a minimal code editor for Python. So I recommend downloading Visual Studio Code at code.visualstudio.com. So code.visualstudio.com, you'll see the page for Visual Studio Code as well, and you can see, and you can just download the stable build for Windows, the Linux version, and Mac OS. So you can download all those versions. Same for downloading Python. It will just automatically show your Python, but if you do not actually want to if you're on Windows and your Mac OS and it thinks that it does not say Mac OS, you can just come here to Mac OS X, and you can see the releases, all the releases, Python 3.8.5, and the Python 2 release, which is Python 2.7.18. Now this one will be using Python 3. I recommend you use Python 3 so we don't get confused between versions of Python and about it. So just close this and let's go to Visual Studio Code to start our new Python project. But of course we have to create some project. We have to create a new project. So I just have a dev folder that I'm using. Let me open it up. Okay, so we're just gonna create something like, we're just gonna create a new project by creating a new folder. And also Visual Studio Code features autosave. So once you've saved something, you don't need to actually call save so many times. It will just autosave for you. But in case you don't get autosave, just hit Control S or Command S on Mac to save. Okay, let's hit a new folder and we're gonna call it Python calculator. And what you're going to do, say now again, Python main.py, and you should see that it should ask me for something. So you can see enter number. I'm going to say 18, enter another number 192. You can see it prints them out and exit the program, you know. And then you can also do operations in the print statement itself. So num1 plus num2. That is actually, we've already done part of the calculator because we're just adding those two numbers together. So we're just adding those two numbers together. So if I do Python main.py, and you can see that it will ask to enter number 18. And let's just call 18, and you can see that it added those two numbers. Well, but it did not literally add those two numbers, so we need to correct that. Yeah, so we can use that to the help of an f string, and the f string, this f is normally used if you don't want the f, you can just use curly braces. So like curly braces, and then you take it into that string, you take it into a dot format method, which is much more messier. So dot format, which just actually formats everything. So it just format everything. But the f string is much more preferred because it's easier to set up. So we can actually say like this, and then we can say num1 plus num2. So this is actually taking those two inputs and actually printing them to the console. So let's just come here, Python main.py. Now there's some advantages and disadvantages with this. Now this system usually takes a little bit of time to show the input, and sometimes it might take so much time that the person can just exit the program. But you can see that nothing happened. Sometimes that happens, so you need to debug your code and see what's the problem. Now it's working. So Python main.py, you can just say 18 and then 18 again, and this will print out why 18. Well, you saw that it's printing out 18 because we never turn them into integers. So they just think it's just a string of 18 and 18 combined together, which is not what you're trying to show. Yeah. Now there are two ways to approach this. The first way is actually use another variable. So num2 to int. Maybe you might go to that approach and use underscores for spaces. This is just a convention. So you can use underscores, and then you can equals int input. Use the int function to turn things from strings to ints. You know, integers are numbers. So integers is like 12 or 31 or any number is, but these are floats. So 14.5, that's a float. So there are differences. So just turning it into an int, and you can use num1, num2, and that is one way to go. Or the very shorthand method is to not waste lines of code and actually just put int. So we can actually wrap things. We can actually wrap functions around other functions in Python. So these input int function. So this is a function, and this requires some data passed in, and this is called a parameter. So we can pass in some parameters here, like sometimes self. Sometimes self is included. So we are going to actually do this. So this is just the development version, and you can see you can turn it into an int using the int keyword. So we can turn it into an int by surrounding it with an int keyword. But the int also requires a base, and that is usually for us base 10. So base 10, and then base equals 10, or you can just pass it like any other parameter. You don't have to include the base, but you can just, for specificity, you can use the base, but it does not pass in like that. So you can pass in 10, like so if you want 10, and that actually turns it into an int. So as you can see that if I use the int function and I highlight over it, it just gives some documentation. You can see x equals base equals that's optional. So if you want to display it in base 10, and not worry our users, because that's what the English language uses. So base 10, numbers, and we can just open our command prompt again, and we can just python main.py. Now you can use the integrated terminal to do quick tasks, but if you're running your program, I recommend you use the command prompt, and you can see it added them together perfectly. Now suppose if I want to an operator, I'm just gonna call this op, and we can just make it a string, and then we can make it import, and then we can call it, and it returns a string. So we're gonna call it enter an operator. And there's also something useful in Python. Now something useful in Python is comments. So you can use the hashtag, and you can use saying getting user input, maybe if they don't know what it means. So you get user input, or there are multiple styles of comments. You can also do it at the end of lines. So you can say getting first number, and you can see when we're getting our first number, and then you can write getting second number. And there's also something else, because those comments are only one line. You can do multiple line comments if you use this notation. Let me just show you. And inside here you can type anything that you want, and it will be ignored by the editor and Python itself. So to be ignored. And the best practice is not actually, when you want to delete code that you think it was a bad idea, just use the hashtag. Just comment it out, or on Visual Studio Code, that's Control/, and works in any language. If I open another language, like unless if it has typing support, you can just use Control/, and that will actually slash and comment. So just wanted to show you the shortcuts of Visual Studio Code, some tips along the way. Okay, let me just close this tab. Okay, so this is actually input an operator, and you see op equals input an operator. Now I'm gonna put a colon here just to make sure, and then we are just going to, don't need to turn it into a string, but this is not like a Go program. We need to create more functions which will actually act as a something for a basis. So we can put them in separate files if you want, but that's a bit hard. So you can put them in separate files if you want, but you can just add number, and we'll take yes, and this is limited to 2 numbers. So if we want to expand it, I'll show you how to do it in the end of this prototype of project. So you can say add 2 numbers. We're gonna make another method and subtract 2 numbers, and then we are just going to def multiply 2 numbers, and then we should have def divide 2 numbers. And actually this should work. So we can just use control flow, and we can learn how to use if statements. So you can say if, you put if and then the condition and then the following code with a colon. So let me show you. So if maybe you can use some code snippets from Visual Studio Code if you want. So if op, so if op is equal to, so if op is equal to, and this is the thing that you should always do, is when you want to actually done this, and you can use the dot method to access its method to lowercase, and that should be a method. Let me just show you. Dot to, let me just check, dot to lowercase. That should be an official method to lowercase, and that should be able to execute and actually bring us the lowercase. So if it doesn't work, just start manipulating some things in your code, and that should work. Or you can just use op, and because make sure you don't have empty methods like this. Make sure that you have just don't show again, and then we can have if op equals that, and then we can just empty string, and then we can use dot to lowercase case just and the if statement. So is equal to maybe something in lowercase, so if you call it plus, and it's always going to be lowercase, because you can't have a plus that's uppercase. That won't work. So if it's equals to plus, we are just going to call add 2 numbers, and actually, and then if or else, so we can have an else, but then if you elif, just elif op equals minus, and let's do minus, and you can just say subtract 2 numbers, which will basically subtract the 2 numbers, and we'll actually continue posting some elifs. So we'll have another elif. Let me just make sure that this is correct, and then we can see that it's going to be, and then it should be the first case, 1, 2, 3 cases, and then the fourth one, which you can use this, you can, the fourth case, and the fourth case is this. So we can change this to the multiplication sign and the division sign, and then we can just say an else. So we can say else. Let me just correct these two, and once I've corrected these two, we can just have an else statement just with a colon, and then we can just say print invalid operator. So invalid operator. So invalid operator. Right, and this program is really actually going to use this add two numbers, subtract two numbers, and actually going to use these numbers. So add two numbers. So you require num1 as a parameter, and just add them in the curly braces, num2, and then we can just use the return keyword to spit it back out, num1 plus num2. That is easy. Subtract two others, you can just return num1 take away num2. So num1 take away num2, and that is actually num1 num2. And then we can also return by two numbers, so num1 take away num2. So num1 take away times num2, so times num2, just use that. And then we're also gonna require num1 num2 and num2, and actually divide two numbers, we're gonna also require num1 num2. Now this is going to return num1 divided by num2, num1 divided by num2, and this is actually going to be making something. So we're gonna just say subtract two numbers, and we'll require num1 and num2. So num1 and num2, and also num1 and num2. Again, we're gonna also say num1 and num2, and also num1 and num2. And finally, if we actually print these, so we're just gonna wrap it in a print statement, because it's actually gonna return those values, not show them literally. Just gonna return them back and actually call it like so. You can just print it out and actually print, and here print, and start actually doing this. So we've done that, actually come into our command prompt and python main.py again, and let's just do it 2017.